Shalom and welcome once again to Elders of GMS, giving all praises to Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai. Today's topic is entitled The 12 Tribes, Moab, and the Edomites in Prophecy. And the reason why I entitled it that is because of, if you watch the news, especially like the Euro News, RT, Russia Today, Press TV, these news stations outside of the U.S., you know, they're telling you what's going on a world economic level. And basically, if you've been watching the news, you know that China and Russia, they both trade among each other. And just recently, they dropped the dollar bill, or the Federal Reserve note, the U.S. dollar bill, as a world currency, or the reserve, all right, or the world reserve, because the reserve currency was the so-called U.S. dollar, or the Federal Reserve note. So now China, which has been in the news quite a bit for their economic powers, are no longer dealing with the U.S. The Federal Reserve note, and the same thing with Russia. And it's almost like at one time they were third world countries, considered poor countries. As a matter of fact, when you go back during the time of the Reagan administration, that's when the USSR was dissolved. But now Russia's coming back in power. And the Chinese, you had those ancient dynasties, now they're coming back into power. And if you notice, the United States, on the economic level, they're not doing too well. So this is why I gave it the title of the 12 Tribes, China, and the Edomites in Prophecy. All right? Now, you have the first tab, the first story. Okay, you can read that.
Okay, this is a web page entitled, Russia Wants to Formalize Relation with EU. Berlin, ahead of a summit meeting Monday in Derville, France, between the leaders of Germany, Russia, and France, Moscow is asking for regular participation in the European Union Committee that is responsible for setting the bloc foreign policy. We would like Russia and the EU to be able to take joint decisions. Vladimir Chizhov, Moscow's ambassador to the European Union, said in a telephone interview with the International Herald Tribune over the weekend from Brussels. I don't expect to be sitting at every session of the Political and Security Committee, but there should be some mechanism that would enable us to take joint steps. Reading on, it says, such arrangements would mark change in the EU-Russia relations, which have been held back because of divisions inside the 27-member bloc over how to deal with Russia. They might also go some way to meet Russia's calls for a new security architecture, a move aimed at gaining a greater say in strategic issues in Europe. We want our relationship with the EU through the Political and Security Committee to be formalized and to be more efficient, Mr. Chizhov said. It seems Germany at least is prepared to go down that path. Reading on, it says, when Chancellor Angela Merkel met President Dmitry Medvedev of Russia in June near Berlin, both leaders proposed the establishment of a new entity called the EU-Russia Political and Security Committee. The new committee would consist of the foreign ministers from Russia and the EU states, as well as Catherine Ashton of Britain, the EU foreign policy chief. The proposal, which Mr. Chizhov said was initiated by Mrs. Merkel, leader of the conservative Christian Democrats, came as a jolt to the other nations in the bloc.
Yeah, basically, you got the gist of it. Basically, you had the EU. Now, the EU goes hand in hand with with NATO, and the U.S. is a part of NATO. Now, the reason why NATO was brought together was in case it was an attack by the former USSR. Let's say the former USSR attacked Germany. Then all the member nations of NATO, that was their business as well. So they were to get involved in that. In other words, if you hit one of the nations, you really hit all of them. But now you see a changing trend. You see that these NATO nations and the EU nations, all right, which are interlocked into one another, they're slowly going on the side of Russia. So now, if they have an interest economic-wise, what if there's some type of attack between Russia and America? Then these other nations, these NATO nations and these EU nations, they can't get involved to take the side of the United States. So that's just another sign of none of these nations respecting America anymore. They don't give a damn about America. All right? Now let's go. You got a scripture? All right.
This is Obadiah chapter 1, verse 7. All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him.
Yeah, so all these, what the brother just read in Obadiah, all these nations that took part, that were friendly with the United States, they're no longer friendly with the United States. All right? Now let's go to the next article.
Okay, the next article is dated Saturday, 27th of November, 2010. It's entitled U.S. Reality Check. China, Russia drop the dollar. A look at how the use of bilateral trade settlement is growing. Chinese Premier Wen Jiabao and Russian President Vladimir Putin announced in St. Petersburg, Russia, on November 23, 2010, that they will stop using the U.S. dollar to settle bilateral trade and instead use the ruble or the yen, according to a report in the state-run China Daily. Bilateral trade between the two countries stands at roughly $60 billion. Put in perspective, assuming 2/3 of international trade is transacted in U.S. dollars, this accounts for 0.03% of dollar usage in a global economy valued at roughly $30 trillion. This agreement, then, is not particularly meaningful in terms of the U.S. dollar utilization. But when we consider the exponential implications, the effects are huge. Consider the fact that China not only has this trade settlement arrangement with Russia, but also has a growing list of settlement partners that so far includes Argentina, Brazil, Belarus, Iceland, Indonesia, Japan, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, South Korea, Thailand, and Vietnam. And then if each of these countries develops bilateral trade settlement partnerships in their own currencies absent the dollar, how would this affect our currency, Fed policy, and the U.S. economy? To understand how this might play out, we need to take an imaginary trip to the border region of China and Russia. Let's say there is a company called Sino-Russia Industries in China that supplies screws and bolts to a truck maker in Russia. On Tuesday, as this Russian truck maker holds USD 100,000 United States dollars 100,000 in its clearing account to cover the cost of the screws and bolts that Sino-Russia Industries supplies, news breaks that the dollar will no longer be used to settle trades. There is then no further need for the truck maker to convert rubles into dollars, and its dollars, for all intents and purposes, are worthless. So what does the truck maker do? The first act the company accountant would take is to ask the bank to sell the dollars for rubles. The bank may do so, but at a discontinued rate. Those discontinued dollars would be shuffled from place to place until they get to someone who knows where and how to spend those dollars for the best value. In America, to buy in-demand consumer products for resale in his home country. We will call this person Mr. Interman, short for Mr. International Businessman.
But anyway, you get what would happen. Well, it already took place a couple of weeks ago. All right, this is a news story from, like I said, a couple of weeks ago, a week and a half ago or so. And the United States, they're going to feel the effect of that. They're going to definitely feel the effect of that. This country's in a recession right now. You're doing real bad, but you're going to do even worse. Because if Russia and China have allies that decide not to use the U.S. dollar, then the U.S. is by itself. And the only thing you have left is to declare war. That's why the British basically got into the war with Germany in World War I and in World War II. These nations got involved in those two wars because of economics, because of trade, because the Germans made the best products back then, and they're making the best products right now. So the handwriting is on the wall. This society is at an end. But I want to focus on Moab, which are the Chinese, and I'm going to prove through the scriptures who the Chinese are. Because there was an article put out in the Daily Trumpet, or the Trumpet, and I'm going to have the reader read it in a few minutes. But basically, it's entitled, Is China in the Bible? And when you read that article, and if you understand the scriptures, you come to the realization that these people at the Trumpet, they don't understand the scriptures at all. All right? But anyway, I'd like you to get the reader to get me Numbers, the 22nd chapter, and start at the top, and we're going to read down to about maybe 8 verses. All right? All right, go ahead.
Numbers